thank you for everything you do and every day. So welcome everyone to the Spring 2022 Alumni Forum. My name is Mary Mattingly. I'm an interdisciplinary artist and I'm the interim director for NOMAD, which is the University of Hartford's Interdisciplinary MFA. So the University of Hartford's Masters of Fine Arts Low programs include illustration, of which designer and illustrator Kennedy Marshall is representing today, photography, of which artist and photographer Justin-Michael Emmanuel is representing, and the interdisciplinary MFA represented here by artist Stowe Len. And Stowe is, I'm presenting about the NOMAD program in Leslie Sobel's stead, who couldn't make it tonight because she's not feeling well. So thank you so much, Stowe, for being here. So I'll just go through a little bit about each of the MFA programs, and then I'm going to hand it over to the panelists to share a little bit about their work. And from there, we'll have a casual conversation about all of the MFA programs, how they worked for you and how they function in your lives and with the other work that you're doing, and how you've learned from them and what you're doing right now. So I'll start with the NOMAD MFA since I'm most familiar with that. It's directed by Carol Padberg, and it's a cross-disciplinary program that consists of high-impact, field-based classes in contemporary art, ecology, place and culture, Indigenous knowledge systems, and the technology spectrum, we like to say from craft to code. This program supports many types of art practices, including eco-art, social engagement, art and pedagogy, community art, art and healing, and practices that explore craft and technology traditions, among others. And this community is really defined by a commitment to a more regenerative future. And through the coursework in the NOMAD MFA, students prepare for a more ambitious, lifelong creative practice, we like to say. So that's NOMAD. The illustration MFA is directed by Society of Illustrators Hall of Fame inductee, C.F. Payne, and was founded by the late Marie Tinkelman, who's a Hall of Fame illustrator, educator, and illustration historian. This program always interacts with leading illustrators, illustration entrepreneurs, agents, and licensing experts. Emphasis is placed on exposing artists to an abundant and diverse array of illustration styles, markets of illustration, and career experiences. So students learn from over 50 professionals in editorial, advertising, animation, children's books, product designs, and the comic book industries. And then finally, the photography MFA was developed and is directed by Robert Lyons. And it's developed for investigating art, documentary practice, and photo-based books. Students learn a curated blend of darkroom work, bookmaking, history of photography, and independent projects. And the program culminates in a thesis, defense, and an exhibition. So all of these MFA Low programs couple these intensive on-campus spring and summer semester sessions with traveling contact periods. I think giving practitioners flexibility in their studies, but we'll hear more from you all in a second. I'll hand the mic over to Justin-Michael to share some of what you did in the photography MFA and since then. And then we'll go directly to Kennedy and then finally to Stowe Len, and we'll have that casual conversation afterwards. So I'll hand it over to you, Justin-Michael.
Thank you so much, Mary. I appreciate it. Hope everyone can hear me okay. I'm gonna first talk a little bit about myself and also just talk a little bit about my experience in the MFA program for photography and show you some work. So can I go ahead and share my screen now? Okay. Sorry, give me just a sec.
While you're looking for that, Justin, I will just hop on and say thank you again to everyone for being here. I have disabled the chat feature, but you should be able to raise your hand or use the Q&A feature. If anyone has any questions along the way, we will save them for when we do the Q&A. So great, Justin's presentation is up. Perfect. I will mute. Go ahead, Justin. Thanks.
Sure, no problem. Sorry about that. I couldn't find the the window for a second. Okay, so this is some of the work that I'll just scroll through a little bit that I worked on, of course, at the MFA program here at University of Hartford. I started making this work back in 2017, and it culminated at UHart just this past summer. And part of what this work is about is it's very community-based work and identity-based work is how I would describe it. I'm photographing in a documentary style, and I'm actually going to read you just a little bit of a summary, which I think describes my intentions and the process quite well. So the title of this work is called A Face Full of Mangoes, which I can also talk more about the title in of itself and what that means. So with this photographic series, I present to you, the viewer, a resistance to systemic racism and also a window into understanding what makes us human. I hope that by showing imagery of touch, warmth, laughter, and love, I may begin to unravel and break down any preconceived notions or ideas that do not give resonance to those qualities in regards to Blackness in the mind of the viewer. I am desperately attempting to declare my own humanity and also have it recognized by others. By showing the gentle side of our human nature, I am hopeful that the viewers will recognize their own familial behaviors and interactions, thus bridging gaps that are set by race, ethnicity, nationality, culture, and economic, social, political forces. This work desires to deconstruct and challenge the mainstream historical imagery that has described Blackness in a light that wasn't his own. And most importantly, is to create empathy among people by showing the human aptitude to love. So like I had mentioned, I started making this work back in 2017. And it was only through, I mean, at that point in time, it was, I was just sort of exploring, I was sort of just exploring myself, my family, my culture, and my identity sort of just photographically. But it wasn't until I got to the program where I was actually able to really focus it on the things I just mentioned. My family comes from Trinidad and Tobago, so I'm actually a first generation student, which maybe some of you folks are. So I just wanted to bring that up also, because I think that makes my perspective and my understanding of the program a little unique in that sense. Yeah, so the program it helped me sort of focus all these, these different things that I'm trying to photograph. It was sort of a large task to try to sort of take on. As I mentioned, I'm looking at my family, I'm looking at my culture, I'm looking at how I assume I might be perceived in American society, and I'm basing it all through, lived experiences, communal experiences from people that I might talk to or engage with, history and other things like that. So that's a little bit about the work and sort of the engagement that I had with the program. And my peers were extremely helpful, and the people that we worked with that are involved with the program very much created a very rich atmosphere to sort of help not only sort of focus the project and sort of focus photographically on these different ideas, but also, it was a cultivating environment. So I would say that between my peers and the sort of organizational structure of the program in of itself really allowed me to sort of very freely sort of experiment photographically, but then also still have that structural element where, I'm not just going left field and sort of just keep going, which was very important. And I think that's sort of a highlight of the program as well. Yeah, so that's a little bit about myself and a little bit about this work. And currently right now, I live in the Boston area. I'm actually from Hartford, Connecticut originally. moved to Boston recently, which is really nice. And I work at a university right now as sort of my day job. And I continue to make photographs basically whenever I can, all the time. And I continue to sort of, continue down the arts photography sort of track. I've gotten into a few shows. I'm working with a publisher right now to get my book published, which is also something that we have to do for the program, which I can talk about later on too. So that's a little bit about me, and feel free to ask any questions. I'm an open book, and I'm very happy to talk with you folks. So.
Thank you, Justin. All right, yeah, there you go. You unmuted it yourself. Awesome. You're the best. Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much, Justin. So now we'll go to Kennedy, and we're gonna save questions for the end after the 3 presentations.
All right, just give me 1 minute to pull up my presentation here. All right, beautiful. Hello, everybody. My name is Kennedy Marshall. I am an illustrator and graphic designer, and I'm going to show you a little bit of work that I do or did for my thesis and am still doing in my freelance and current job. So a lot of the work that I did for my thesis in terms of illustration was children's book covers and children's book spreads. So here's a couple of examples of some children's books covers that I did in memoriam to some inspirational people that kind of their work got me through the pandemic. So we've got Brother Is, Steve Irwin, and Bob Ross. So I highly recommend looking into their things if you have not, if you are not aware of them. And then here, the piece on the left is actually a reaction piece that I did while I was in the program about Jim Henson. It's one of my favorite pieces that I did. It was the last reaction piece that we did. So when you travel with the illustration MFA, you're given these assignments to react to things that you were exposed to. Granted, at this point, we weren't really traveling, so it was a little different, but this was still one of my favorite pieces. And then a piece of character work that I had done as well. I love doing character art. It's one of my favorite things to do as an illustrator. But a lot of the work that I do professionally is consumer products and licensing illustration. So a lot of patterns and badges, but it is my favorite thing to do. I can sit and make patterns all day, mood boards and things like that. So a lot of colors, a lot of textures. I'm very influenced by folk art and vintage things, and very bright colors and a little bit of kawaii, if I'm being honest. But yeah, I'm gonna scroll back a little bit. So the MFA program was very much a proving ground for myself. I came in working one way, and finally found the courage to take the voice that I had inside and finally put it out into the world and made the portfolio that I really wanted to do. And that portfolio I've been able to take and finally get the job of my dreams and just continue on from there. So I can't say enough about this program. It exposed me to the artists and the art styles that I needed to see and show me that it was possible to do what I wanted to do and that you could have a career in that. So, I can't say enough about at least the illustration MFA. It's been a life-changing experience, and it really showed me that there's not just one path to being an illustrator. You can do children's books and editorial and advertising, but there's also other markets out there where your art is just as valid and you can have just as much of an impact and be successful and have a great time doing it. So that's me. I'm going to keep it short and sweet.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kennedy. And we'll hand it over to Stowe.
Okay, cool. This is really great because I didn't know about the other MFA programs. Nomad MFA is so nomadic. We were only in Hartford once a year, which was great, but we spent a lot of time on the road. So you know, I live in New York, and I've lived in New York since 2000. This was a photograph I took right when I moved to New York. And I think, you know, in coming into the program, I really brought my experiences from living in New York into my work and into kind of where I was headed. But when I first moved to New York, I was really drawn to the waterways. You know, New York City is really surrounded by water, and yet upon arriving, I kind of realized a lot of people had their backs to the water. You know, they were sort of distracted by the spectacle of the city. And I found solace on the edges, you know, like along the waterfronts. And I just started exploring them, you know, as something to do. And a lot of them are industrial waterways. And kind of as I got more and more, you know, interested and deeper into these explorations in the city, I found myself hanging out on this little tributary that's called the Newtown Creek. So the East River is on the left there, and then the Newtown Creek is this 4-mile tributary that comes inland and divides Brooklyn from Queens. But I just started hanging out there, and this is like years, you know, like 10, 12 years of hanging out on these waterways and looking at them. And kind of looking at the state of the water, which was pretty, you know, pretty polluted. And so as a printmaker, I had been doing a lot of printmaking with water. And so I began actually using the waterway as a studio and going out with paper, armed with paper, and printing from the surfaces of the water. So it was a real kind of liberating thing for me to bust out of the studio and all of a sudden just work in nature, you know, urban nature, but nature nonetheless. And for me, this was a way of mapping where I lived and the waterways around me, as well as the human imprint, you know, that we had forced upon the water. So it was also a great way to explore uncharted territories, you know, places that you couldn't get to by land, that you could only find with like a little boat. So I was learning more and more about my city through this process and this practice. I even created a little place I called the Newtown Creek Center for Visual Research, which was a guerrilla shack, really, by the water that hosted a lot of events. I had been evicted from a studio around that time, so I just sort of took it upon myself to build a studio along the waterway for a couple of years there. And so this work, you know, as it slowly progressed, it became apparent that it was about giving visibility to sites and specifically maligned sites, you know, sites that people would not necessarily want to go to or give love to. So you know, I really focused on New York, and then I started to focus on other places. And one of the big places I was focusing on was Vietnam. As a half Vietnamese person, I was doing a lot of cultural and, you know, self identity kind of work, and going back there and kind of learning more about my culture through water and through this process. You know, so I began traveling to other places as well, you know, and just trying to figure out how to travel as an artist, how to do it respectfully, how to do it, you know, in a way that was adding to the conversation and not exploiting it in any way, you know. So this was like a lot, you know, it was a couple years of doing this, and the more I did it, the more I kind of wanted to really hone in on the sort of like skill of a traveling artist. So, you know, traveling artists are typically, I feel like the most normal traveling artist is like a musician, right? You know, you like tour. And I tried that, but what I didn't like is that you would go to one place for one night and then you would leave, you know, and I always wanted to stay longer. So when I discovered the Nomad program, for me, it was the best of both worlds, is being able to travel, go to places, but you would stay, you know, and you would actually like embed yourself into that place, into that community, learn about the place, actually form real relationships with people, and do it in like an incredibly respectful way. And that was for me the big selling point of the Nomad program was that it was, the politics for me were directly aligned with my own, and that sort of skill that's not easy to do, of traveling and kind of being sort of a conduit for, other kinds of like connections and spontaneous art making with people who live there. So that was a big part of that program for me. And, while I was there, I kind of moved a little bit away from water to the materials that wind up in our waterways. So I got pretty obsessed with styrofoam as a material and what its like history and what these materials are and what their legacy is going to be. At the same time, I got interested in this printmaking technique called gyotaku, which is it's a fish impression, quite literally. And I kind of subverted that idea and just began, kind of doing impressions with the styrofoam and other detritus that I was pulling out of the water. So for my thesis exhibition, it really kind of culminated in this lexicon in a way of the legacy of our waste. It was like a way to kind of give order to the chaos of our waste, and kind of witnessing that and trying to bear witness to that in a way that was honoring, and acknowledging our actions, right? So, and what's cool is like, so I did that, and through the program, it kind of got me into this idea that could travel. So I just did this in Frenchtown, New Jersey, where I actually had people go and pick up the they were like doing a trash pickup, and they were picking up the trash and giving it to me, and I used those objects for the prints. So it was kind of a nice way to collaborate with a river cleanup community and travel with that. And so currently I'm an artist in residence at the Department of Sanitation in New York City, which is just like another step forward, I think, in terms of like working with and about waste. Oops. This work has me in this 10,000 person workforce, and so I've been doing a lot of historical research. I've been going to all the places, I was kind of like, I want to go everywhere. I want to go from the curb to the waste transfer station, to the landfill, to the incinerator, and everything else. But what's interesting about this whole residency for me, which is, it's a year-long residency, I'm about halfway through, but a lot of it is really about recycling materials that are in sanitation. So I found this old print shop that I kind of resurrected and turned into an operating silkscreen shop that they don't use. They haven't used it in like 30 years. And I found this old TV station. So I've been creating video works, kind of using old archival footage that they have with new footage that I'm shooting. And there's these flat screen TVs everywhere in sanitation that I've been taking over and putting my own content on them. They'll have like the normal schedule and stuff. And then I show up and like do like a weird TV show on the TV. But it's a cool way for me to ask questions and sort of interact with the 10,000 person workforce, So it's turning into working with people and like collaborating with people who are in the business of waste management, but I'm really focusing on the people. It's like super interesting. So anyways, like that project, it's not totally out yet, but it's called the Office of Invisibility. And it's all about bearing witness to the work and giving the people at the department a platform, a place to be seen. So yeah, I think that's my story.
Thank you, Stowe. Thanks, everyone. Thank you. You're all making really thoughtful, important work, and from spaces that are less seen and noticed to love and family, to collaborations and storytelling and even fantasy. It's like such a broad scope, and really, really incredible to see the work that's happening was happening in different departments and that you all are doing. I want to throw a question out for anybody. I think Kennedy and I had a brief discussion about this, so maybe if no one else wants to, you might be prepared, but I think it's a little bit of a fishing question, but how did the MFA program help you find the voice that you're sort of pursuing at this point? And we know that it will change, of course, constantly, but the work that you're doing right now, how is it sort of influenced by the MFA program?
I don't mind being the first one to answer this one, because I think this was, I think it's a good question, and it's something that I actually have, I was forced to think about while I was in the program and reflecting on the program afterwards as well. I would say I was very much pushed in the program. Like, it was very intense, but in the best way possible. It consistently and constantly forced me to reevaluate how I was thinking and therefore how I was seeing, which obviously as a photographer, this changes or influences my process to varying degrees. So I think because I had such a strong critical engagement of the photographs I was making and my process by my peers and everyone else, that's sort of what helped cultivate the visual language of how I photograph now, and certainly how this project went along. But as a photographer generally, it was that constant engagement, that constant analysis is sort of what allowed that voice to sort of develop into where I am now.
Thanks, Justin. Can you talk a little bit more about that organizational structure you mentioned in terms of, I guess, critiques, but also in terms of the low residency? So I'm trying to picture the online critiques versus in person and how that worked throughout the 2-year program.
Sure. So how it worked for me was I had weekly advisor check-ins with my advisor, who I had Michael Virenwald for my first year, and then Robert for my second year. It's a 2-year program. So those meetings were maybe a little bit less so of a critique, but it sort of kept me up to task. It sort of kept me on beat.
Mhm.
I knew that every other week I was required to show, it might have been 20 or 25 new images. But it wasn't necessarily, it wasn't like, okay, you need 25 or 20 images, and if you don't have that, then, it's wasted. If I had spent that week or those 2 weeks reading instead, or doing some research, or spending some time in the public library, or simply talking to people and transcribing interviews and different things like that, all to help sort of inform the process, that was all totally okay. Mm-hmm. So in that sense, the structure was open-ended, at least for those advisor meetings. And then when it came to when we would travel, which because of COVID, I only got to travel once, unfortunately, but it wasn't all bad. We went to San Francisco. I think it was my first year, the first trip actually. We were able to go to San Francisco for about 2 weeks. I met a lot of really fantastic folks at the MFA in San Francisco, as well as what's it called? Might be San Francisco MoMA. I can't remember, but yeah. So I met some other really very established photographers, very established artists who also would sit in on our critiques. And provide feedback in real time, which is also extremely useful. And also apart from that, my cohort was also just very active. I was very, I guess, blessed to have the cohort that I did have, where we would get together every, maybe once every 6 weeks and have an impromptu critique with just each other and whoever could make it, also to sort of keep us up to task and to sort of keep us fresh and keep us, constantly thinking and analyzing and analyzing the work. So it was a mix of, I think, the commitment of the people I was around, and also, just how everything was sort of set up. Every other week you're meeting with your advisor, and then basically once a semester you're, traveling to somewhere else. I just traveled on Zoom, but that was fine. So I hope that answers your question or gives you a little bit more insight into what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. If anybody else wants to take on that question, about finding your voice. Carla, I actually can't see the questions in the chat, but
I can go ahead and talk a little bit to that while you're looking for how to find the chat if you want.
Thanks.
So for me, this program was really integral to finding the voice that I have now in my work. When I came into this program, I was doing something very different from what I do now. I was working in the scientific illustration field. I worked very realistically, and that was what I did. But I wasn't necessarily happy with what I was doing. And then I came into the illustration MFA and I was exposed to all of these different styles of illustration and professionals working in the field. And I remember the most transformative contact period for me was our Philadelphia contact period, where I had met a bunch of illustrators who were also graphic designers. And a lot of them were working with a lot of flat color and limited texture and things like that. And it something in my mind really clicked at that time. And that was also when I really started getting exposed to the idea of consumer products and licensing illustration. And it was in that contact period, like, this is what I want to do, and this is where I need to go. And that's when I kind of tossed out my thesis up until that point too, and really kind of reworked everything and just decided I was going to go for it, because, you know, the MFA was that perfect kind of place to do it. You know, we're here to build this portfolio that's going to take us to the next point in our lives. You know, why not go for it and just see where it takes you? So that's what I did. And I had a wonderful thesis advisor who was very supportive of what I was doing. So that also really helped.
And where is your dream job? Charlotte asks.
Oh, I work for Disney now. I work for Disney Parks Experiences and Products as a graphic designer and illustrator.
Thank you. And then in terms of maybe that question for Stowe, I wanted to ask, you know, how is travel as an artist? You know, you mentioned in a way you want to travel in a way that's adding to a conversation and not exploiting it. And I'm wondering if you could maybe talk about that from the perspective of the MFA program.
Sure. Yeah, I think I had been sort of doing that on my own previous to the program, but what was great seeing how the program really connected with people, you know, well before touching ground. I mean, I feel like there were like these great relationships. I know Carol and other folks would go previous to the students going to really build those real relationships with people, so that we were able to come in and basically from day one, you know, begin working with people, even living with some people, you know. And so I think that taught me a lot about just preparation, you know, and really researching the place as much as possible before going there, and building those relationships, you know, beforehand. And then, so, you know, as a traveler, you know, your time is limited. So also those residencies were action packed. There was not a second wasted. And, and I appreciated that. You know, I think it's to really make the most out of something you do really have to kind of squeeze it in the best way possible. So I was admiring and learned a lot about that type of preparation for a trip like that, you know. And then, you know, just in my own practice, certainly some of the people that we met through the program became, you know, friends of mine, and people who I admire and look up to. And it just expanded my bandwidth. I mean, it expanded what was on my radar, you know, and it expanded my reading list. It expanded the types of artists that I was looking at, you know, and that I know. And so I think that, you know, I kind of was already doing my thing, so to speak, but coming into Nomad, it just blew me out of the bubble that I was in. And I sort of felt like I was in this bubble that was maybe like a little stagnant, you know. So it blew that right open. And, you know, because of COVID, I haven't ironically been doing that much traveling, but traveling within the Department of Sanitation is like 10,000 people is like a small town, you know. So, you know, I'm taking all those skills into this municipal agency, and it's just like traveling anywhere else, you know.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's such an amazing project. I want to transition to Nancy's question and ask about, you know, maybe in general, what has it meant to earn an MFA? And Nancy specifically asked about entering the teaching field, and if that's part of anyone's reasoning for now having an MFA, or if that's a hope for the future, or if you're considering it at all.
Absolutely. Teaching was definitely on my radar when I came into the MFA program. It was honestly part of the reason that I chose this illustration MFA specifically, because they do have an emphasis on teaching. I mean, we have an entire pedagogy class that you take as part of the program. So I've always been interested in teaching. I was tutoring fine art to homeschool kids before I even came into the MFAs, and I wanted to be able to take that to the next level and teach at a collegiate level someday. And having an MFA is really important to doing that. So that was definitely part of my decision to go back.
Thanks. Were there any other resources at the school that helped in finding your life job after school ended? That's an anonymous question for Kennedy or anybody.
I mean, there was definitely networking that I did while I was in the illustration MFA that helped to ultimately lead me to where I am now. I will say that because we met so many people while we were traveling, and even while we were on like the distance learning over Zooms and everything. And the nice thing about the illustration MFA is a lot of the alumni, we keep in contact. We have drawing sessions every couple of weeks and all of that. So that networking has actually been really important to landing where I am now. So I will say, yeah, I definitely think that the networking portion of the MFA was important to helping me get to where I am here.
Thank you. Oh, so many questions about the equipment that you use, Kennedy, to how working at Disney is. I think if you want to quickly respond to those.
So what type of computer did I have? So I worked on a 2015 MacBook Pro, and I had a 12.9-inch iPad Pro, both running Photoshop, Illustrator, and then I had Procreate on my iPad. That was my equipment during my MFA. So where's that question, or did that question go away? It went away.
Yes, no, that was the question. And then, yes, how was working at Disney?
It's fantastic. It's everything that I could have ever dreamed of. I'm so happy to be here, and I'm very thankful for going back to school and getting this degree, because without it and without the portfolio I made here, I would not be here in this job. So
thanks. I think I'd love to address Maddie's question about working while you're getting your MFA. So was anybody working full-time, part-time? Were there strategies that you found that helped you find a balance in that?
I worked full-time while I did my MFA. And that was another reason why I chose this program, because the low residency format allowed me to keep my full-time job and continue to go to school at the same time, because working was how I was going to pay to go to school. So I was really good at scheduling myself so that I had a little book, and I had written out how many projects I had to do a week, and what time on the weekends I was going to be working on projects, and when you were going to do your laundry and things like that, because you have to be really structured, because 2 years and 2 weeks goes really, really fast. But it is well worth it, for sure, especially if you do work and freelance, because having that time and not being in school every single day of the week makes a huge difference.
Yeah, Kennedy, you are a trooper for working throughout the MFA, for working full time throughout the program. My experience was a little bit different. It was very well planned, if I could say so myself. I worked beforehand to save up money to attend the program, because I knew just from some of the people who I spoke to who were actually part of this program in the past, and also other photographers I know who did get an MFA. The story was all the same. It's extremely difficult to work full time and be this committed to it. So I sort of wanted to get a head start and self-prepare for that. But I did do some freelance work from time to time just to sort of help myself stay afloat while I was in the program as well. At least that was my experience. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, to the point of the low residency being a key part of this, it was a key part for me because, you know, I didn't want to give up any opportunities that were happening potentially in New York City. So I didn't maintain a full-time job, but I was doing like freelance stuff, freelance landscaping, or showing art and selling it, you know, in shows and stuff like that. So I think not putting that stuff on pause was really key for me to be able to, you know, do the program. I also took out loans too, so I was living off of some of that.
So thanks. There's a question from Abigail in Q&A for you about the different places that you visited in residency and maybe specifically how they influenced the work that you're making. And I know some of the places were, you know, we weren't able to go to because of COVID, but.
No, we went to all of them actually.
Oh yeah, we even went to Miami the last.
Yeah, Miami, we came back March 1st, 2020. Just got that sucker in. That was the last trip. Yeah, a lot of them were places that I really had wanted to go to already. And so it was amazing to go to New Mexico, for instance. I had never been. And I just fell in love with the people we were working with and the land itself. And I actually stayed with some of my cohort. You know, my cohort was great. Like we would a lot of times would stay and like travel even more past the program. And so that time we went on this epic road trip and I ended up staying even longer, found myself in like Truth or Consequences, you know, it was great. But I've come back, like I went back last year actually to New Mexico to do a residency on my own. And so, you know, I think it's helped me build relationships to places in a really meaningful way. Mexico as well. I really had always wanted to go there, and you know, now have homies in Mexico. You know, it's great.
Thanks. A question for everybody from Marcia. Do you all feel like you've built a supportive career network from the program that you were in? And maybe specifically with professors and your cohort?
Absolutely. My cohort still keeps in very regular communication. If I have a piece that I'm working on for an illustration and I feel like I've hit a wall, I'll just send it to them and go, okay, what do you think? You know, be honest. I don't care if you think it's terrible. I need to know because it's burned into my eyeballs and I need somebody else to look at it right now. I love my cohort. They are a fantastic group of people, and I'm very thankful to have met them because we all work so differently, and we've gone in different paths, but we all come together and we're the best of friends. So yeah, that's one of the really nice things about low residency is because it's such a small class and because you're traveling together, you get really close to your classmates. And sometimes the work that they do influences the work that you do, and it's really fun.
Yeah, I agree. To add to that as well, the other thing too, because you're traveling with each other, it's like, at least for my class, because of COVID, whenever I saw them, it was always very special to see them in person. And not only that, but what we were doing then became even more special, became even more important because we knew the time was so limited. And so I think because of that, you know, I've probably similar to both of you, but I've grown very fond and very close to my cohort. We still talk we have our own WhatsApp group, and we still talk pretty regularly. You know, sometimes it's a little quiet for a few weeks, but you know, we'll still check in, say hi. You know, does anyone want to, you know, get a cup of coffee if they live close, or have a Zoom meeting? You know, and also just for the professional and career feedback as well. I can, you know, if someone's looking for you know, connections for, you know, if, you know, for someone who's in LA for some gallery, or, you know, they need a freelance connect or something like that, you know, we're very, you know, we can hook each other up, you know, very easily. And it's also very supportive. So, yeah.
Thanks. I have a question related to that. I did want to ask, you know, how can the MFA programs sort of better continue to assist you all now that you're alumni? Or we can come back to that. Think about that one.
Let me think on that one.
Yeah, I mean, I think just staying in the conversation, is nice. I think, I don't know if there was a way to share opportunities. I mean, we kind of do that through like WhatsApp groups and stuff like that, but it feels nice to just sort of see what people are working on and, share information.
I have also been typing answers to some questions in the Q&A that I knew the answers to. But so if anyone wants to, just kind of scroll through that, if there's anything you want to add to anything, or if anyone would like more elaboration on any of the things that I just typed answered from, but you would like to hear a live answer, feel free to do that again in the Q&A. Thank you.
A technical question. When you're not in person for the summer sessions or the residency sessions, do you complete assignments via Zoom or do you go to classes on campus? I guess that might depend on which program.
Yeah, that depends on the program. They are all a little bit different. The general overview that kind of is similar for all three programs is that you get together in person like 2 or 3 times a year, and it's for a really intensive session, and you do like all your learning in this really short period of time, and then you take that and process it and do your own work continually throughout the entire year and the entire 2.5 years of the program. And so, yeah, depending on what program you're interested in, we could certainly provide sample schedules and, examples of how a residency would look. So if you're interested in more details about those things, I would suggest you email us at mfa@hartford.edu.
Thank you, Carla. Maddie has a question for Stowe about the Department of Sanitation residency and, how was it created?
Oh, it's part of a program created by the Department of Cultural Affairs in New York called PAIR, Public Artists in Residence. So they embed artists, I think 2 or 3 a year. It was an application. So I applied and got it. And that comes up every year, and they pick different departments. So they pick different municipal agencies. I know someone else is in the Department of Records. Other people have done the Office of Immigration, or, kind of, I think someone was at Rikers Island even. Is kind of amazing projects and a really great opportunity. But that's all inspired by the work of Meryl Latterman Euclides, who is actually I want to say the first artist who really embedded oneself into a city agency. She began doing that in the late 70s in the Department of Sanitation. So there's a legacy there with her, but they didn't really officially start doing that until 2015. And, when we Nomad went to Minneapolis, and when we were there, they have a city artist program there. I think maybe one of the first ones in the US, but hopefully that happens in more cities. I don't know. I don't know. This is maybe a handful of other cities that do that, but it's super cool. Yeah, and I hope that keeps happening.
Thanks. Question for Kennedy. What is a class day in the summer like?
Well, that depends on what year that you're in, but I guess I'll start with what a day in the summer is like for your first year of the illustration program. So they're a little bit longer days because the first year is very intense. It's because they're really trying to start you from the bottom and rebuild you and show you just how far you can go. And I don't even know how to describe it. It's such a transformative experience those first 2 weeks. You've turned out so much work. I've turned out more work in those first 2 weeks of the illustration MFA program than I've ever put out in my entire life. But it is so worth it. And when you get to the end, you're like, oh my gosh, I did that. But those first 2 weeks are the most intense weeks of the whole program. They are longer days. So you start at like 7-ish in the morning and you're out by 5 in the afternoon, 6 in the afternoon, and there's lunch in the middle of the day. And that's a balance of studio classes and lectures and things like that throughout the day. And then second year, it's a little bit more relaxed. You get to come in a little bit later. It's still a balance of studio classes and lectures, and then you're still out by 5-ish. And then your final year is nice because it's like you're wrapping things up, you're putting in your installation for the gallery and things like that. So yeah, it depends on which year you're in.
Justin, is it like that for photography as well?
It's similar. Our days ran a little longer, at least some, the first 2 weeks, because we were doing a lot of darkroom, and it's just a long process. It just is what it is. So we'd also, I'd get to campus also like around 7:30, but some days I didn't walk out the building until 10 p.m. So it was very intense, and it was, it was exhausting, but it wasn't, if you're like me, you're sort of happy the whole time. you don't notice, that you're like, oh, it's 10 p.m. already. You're excited to come back, because it's meaningful work. It's meaningful work, and you feel, I felt like I was truly gaining, the skills that I needed to get better at the craft. And that's just sort of, that's what you're signing up for. So, yeah.
Thank you. I think we should end with these two questions, and anybody feel free to answer, but they're anonymous. What was your favorite part of your time in the program? And then is there anything you'd change about the program as you experienced it?
I think if I can jump in, I think something that I would change about the program was I wish that there was maybe a little bit more interaction with the other, not just the other two programs, but just other disciplines in general. At times, I feel like I was maybe, just very photo crazy, very photo focused. And it might have been nice to get some input, from someone who does sculpture, someone who does dance or something like that. I think that could have made it fuller for sure.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Justin. I mean, I think the Nomad was, we were there in the summer, and it always felt like we were sort of there by ourselves, and which was fine. But yeah, I would have loved some more cross-pollination, perhaps, and just knowing what other people were doing, and yeah, maybe having open studios with all of us could be really cool. Yeah.
It's not too late. We can always do an alumni.
Right.
Yeah, I think I'm seeing much more clearly now, having 3 people from each program having a conversation together, that there really is so much more opportunity for sharing of work. I mean, despite whatever discipline you all are using, we're all artists. We're all trying to advance our careers and make a difference in the world. And so I think this is actually a wonderful outcome that, yeah, we should think about how to mix all of the alumni from all of the MFA programs and have this one huge support system. So I think this was a wonderful idea to come out of this panel. So thank you all for that.
Yeah, and I see that there's one more question in the chat for Justin about the book that you're working on. And Justin, I wonder if you would mind. I see that you're typing your answer, so maybe that's okay. But if you want to share on the panel, that I would love to hear as well.
Oh, sure. Yeah. No, I didn't know if we'd have time. So I was like, oh, let me type away before everyone goes. So for the MFA program for photography, you're actually required to produce a finished book to graduate. Obviously it won't be published, but for myself, a lot of people in my cohort, people who I know who have gone through the program, who have went on to publish basically a photo book of the same work that they've done in the program, basically had it about 95% complete when they finished the program. So you sort of know that that's the intention right off the bat. And that's sort of, for better or for worse, it focuses how you're approaching your work, because okay, I'm gonna eventually have to sequence these 600 photos. I'm gonna eventually have to, find some narrative, some story that fits my that fits the process, that fits where my emotions are, where my head is at. And as far as interviewing people goes, since my work is it's heavily about communal stories and familial stories that are very particular to the people that I know. But there's a saying I really love, and it says, in the particular lies the universal. Mm-hmm. So something that is very important to, it feels like it's only happening to you, is often sometimes what's the most relatable for a lot of people. And sometimes it's something very simple or a very simple concept, such as hugging a grandmother or hugging a child or cooking for people, cooking for your family after someone maybe passed away, or hugging a child on their birthday. Those things sometimes have a lot more importance than we initially sort of take them, some of us take them for granted. But as far as interviewing and things like that, I would sort of collect stories from the people that I know, their personal stories, and that would just go into sort of my mental data bank to sort of help me frame conceptually, and it also helped me figure out, okay, maybe I'm photographing indoors, I'm photographing in very intimate spaces where things tend to be maybe a little bit tighter, people are closer, so maybe I'll use a more narrow lens. Maybe I won't use a very wide lens to also reflect sort of that intimacy, that tightness, different things like that. Hope that answers the question. And I started shooting film, and by the time the program was over, I actually switched to digital for practical use. And to be quite honest, I was shooting medium format film, and after a while, it just gets a little too expensive. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think that this has been a really rich conversation, and like the beginning of more relationships to come. So I'm really glad that I could be part of it, and thank you all for being part of it. And if there are any more questions, maybe we could put our emails in the chat or something like that. I don't know, Carla, how do you want to do that?
Yeah, no, this sounds wonderful. Thank you so much, Mary. You were an amazing moderator, as I knew you would be. And yes, Justin-Michael, Stowe, and Kennedy, you three are shining examples of the type of people that we have in these programs. And it's just been wonderful to reconnect. And yes, I did put your websites in the description for the webinar, so that's there. And I can also we have been recording this session for delayed viewing for people who couldn't make it, or if they had technical difficulties. So I think we will be publishing this on a website somewhere, and so we can make sure that if there are follow-up questions or ways to contact, we can put that out there as well, because I think you're right, this is a very fruitful conversation. And the dean and the associate dean, Nancy Stewart and Robert Calafiore, also gave their thanks and appreciation to you all for your time as well. It's been wonderful. So yeah. I think we're good. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thanks. And I think it does help us conceive of like ideas for alumni programs. So thank you for that too.
Yeah, I love it. So it's awesome. And thank you to the 18 of you who are still here. And we had I thought I saw over 30 in the participants at one point. So we've had wonderful people who asked questions and were really engaged, and we very, very much appreciate it.
That. Yeah.
Yeah. Then I think we're good. I think I will sign off, and have a wonderful evening. Have a wonderful everything. Thank you so much, everybody. Reach out with any more questions or concerns. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a great night, everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much. Hope you have a good night.
Thank you.
Bye.